most mids, usually lower rocker, you want to find a rhythm where you're going back and forth from the rail. The board is attached to the wave. I'm not lifting it out of the water.
These pumps, but these pumps are these big swooping bottom turn to high line to bottom turn to high line swoops. And I think the reason why that can be so beneficial of training yourself to do is because that's actually the way you want to get ready to do a turn. So let's get into, your approach to riding mid-length, because I feel like it does make surfing a lot more approachable. And I feel like it's a great way to learn how to do turns and generate speed. It forces good technique in a lot of ways. And so, what are your thoughts? Maybe we could start even with just the basics of generating speed.
Sure. Well, you're usually coming at it from one angle or the other. So one angle is you're sort of coming up to it. You're sizing up from a shortboard. So there's that perspective. And then there's the longboard and you're sizing down. So, and there's kind of different approaches depending where you're coming from. So let's start with shortboard. So shortboards have a very short rail, obviously, and they typically have a lot more rocker, and they often have a little bit more going on in the bottom with concaves. Not all, but most of those boards work and are propelled forward through a pumping action, where you're really lifting the board out of the water. You're lifting and you're tic-tacking back and forth, and at the same time you're on sort of almost like a ball bearing, but you're sort of like lifting up and you're on this gyro. And especially if you have a shortboard with a single concave entry, you can't just stand up, point to the channel or wherever, and cruise. It just doesn't work. You're going to bog. However, if you watch everyone around you, you pick it up, you figure out how to pump. Oh, whoa! Now I'm flying. Now I have some speed, and then you can get into the talk about maneuvers. But so knowing that that's happening as a shortboarder, when you get onto a mid-length, it is so hard to resist doing this. You have to, the first few waves, do nothing at all. Kind of how we jokingly started off this conversation. Is total reset. Just get up and aim for the shoulder and just sort of feel it. And you're like, okay, oh, this thing trims really quite easily on its own without doing anything. All right. Okay. And then a couple more waves. Now start leaning on your inside rail of your front side and just feeling this rail, because what the big difference is shortboarding is tail surfing. You're riding off the tail and the fins mostly. Mid-length surfing is rail surfing. And I think when you can really understand that, it allows you to sort of settle into it and not fight it. I work at Channel Islands. I've been here for about 5 years. We're known for performance shortboards. We have a lot of world-class shortboard surfers here. And when they've gotten on the mid-length without any instruction, without me saying a word, they didn't always, it wasn't like an immediate falling in love. It was like, this is kind of frustrating. And watching them ride it without saying anything, they were over surfing the board. So they were trying to tic-tac back and forth. So when you can kind of see my hand here on the screen. Now, if I do that on a mid-length, I'm breaking trim. It's almost like a mini stall in a way.
Yep.
Now, there are some mid-lengths. I don't even need to say the brands. There are mid-lengths out there with way more rocker than the ones that I like to ride. Now, those are more of a shortboard rocker. You probably could pump them, but it's going to look a little awkward, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of board to pump back and forth. It's sort of like riding a giant, Sector 9 board in a pool or on a ramp. It's like you can do it, but it looks like they're kind of struggling, like really having to work for it. So most mids, eggs, whatever you're riding, even if it's a fish shape, they're usually lower rocker. And you don't want to pick the board up back and forth. Instead, what you want to do is you want to find a rhythm where you're going back and forth from the rail. So it's more of you get on this ball bearing kind of thing and you're on one rail. So I put, 3/4 of the rail in the water on a bottom turn, then I start climbing up the face, and then I lean back to the other side, and it becomes this different type of pumping. The board is attached to the wave. I'm not lifting it out of the water.
Yeah.
And I'm going in this back and forth rhythm. And the rhythm works when you put the board in the right part of the wave. So it's difficult to do if you're way ahead of the section. You're going to struggle, and you're just like any board, you're not going to do very well out there. So you want to be a bit in the pocket, take off a little bit deeper. Let's say you see a wave coming, almost like you're backdooring a section. You're not, obviously the wave's not tubing if it's just playful. And when you get to your feet, maybe angle the board a little bit. Maybe don't go straight to the beach, because it is a lot of board, and because it's lower rocker, it may not fit in the curve of the wave initially. So my advice on when you're starting off riding these types of boards is to paddle in on a 45-degree angle, which I think most any surf instructor would tell you to do that with most any board. But it's especially true with these, because if the wave pitches up and you're coming, especially we're still talking about people coming from the shortboard, it's going to really catch you off guard having that extra foot out in front of you, and it's lower. So to fit in that curve, go on a 45, go down and aim to the trough of the wave, and now kind of get in like a snowboard mode. Not in a park, but if you've ever watched snowboarding, powder, those guys and gals that do the giant carves, that's sort of what the mid-length is. You're doing this long rail surfing, you're engaging one rail, so off the bottom turn, I'm all this rail's in, 3/4 of it at least. I like to go to 5/6. I like just a little bit out. And then as I'm coming up, now the board has contact with the face, and it's more or less like straight, like right on the face. And then you go up, and instead of going up the face of the wave like a shortboard, you're in this attack mode of, I'm going to aim for 12 o'clock. The reality is most people only go to 9 or 10, but in your mind, you're like, I'm going to 12 o'clock.
Right.
You don't want to do that on the mid-length. You intentionally want to aim for 9 o'clock on a mid-length. So you just change the trajectory of where you're going up the face. You can go 12 o'clock on a mid-length if you're really good. But again, it goes back to that example of this giant skateboard in a pool. It just gets really cumbersome. But the board wants to go to 9 o'clock. It's very comfortable there. And then when you get to 9 o'clock, you can kind of tickle the lip if you want, or just slightly adjust and turn underneath the lip, and then look down the line. What's the wave doing? Do we need to cut back now? Like, what is the wave slowing down? If it does, we're going to talk about that in just a second. If it's still running, now I'm going to wind up again. I'm going to aim down to the trough, and whether it's my bottom turn or that after that first sort of roller coaster top turn, whatever you want to call it, coiling up your body is really helpful. So when you go down to the bottom of the wave, compressing into the board a little bit, like you don't want to be too straight up and down with your body, too stiff. You could look at a few videos of myself or Torn or Mikey, and it'll better illustrate it than I can articulate it. I can't describe it any other way than just sort of like coiling up like a snake that's going to strike. Shortboarders do the same thing.
Right.
But it's a smoother sort of more subtle thing. It's not a pure like muscling through this aggression. And the reason is because with all of that rail, all of your turns and everything is a much wider arc. So it allows you to sort of feel more comfortable and just sort of be smooth anyways as a byproduct. Like you don't have to try to be stylish, which is a whole other part of this conversation. The boards themselves lend the surfing to be more like smooth, because the smoother you are, the easier you'll be able to control the board easier. Remember what I was talking before about lifting the board up and
Yep.
tic-tacking.
Yep.
That's a really jerky motion that breaks the trim. Well, you could do the same thing off a bottom turn or a top turn if you try to lift the board where you put a lot of weight on your back foot and you're sort of lifting the front of the board up to
Yeah.
place the board wherever you're trying to go. I would recommend avoiding doing that. Shortboards are better. Like just stick
Yeah.
to the shortboard.
Well, the way you described it, I love it. And I think that's one of the things that I love about, and I think this helped fix an aspect of my surfing, going from riding shortboards to going and riding mid lengths, right? Because when you're riding a shortboard, there is this tendency to just try to pump as fast as possible. You're usually in the middle of the wave. You're expending all this
Right.
energy. You're throwing your arms around, and it doesn't look smooth, obviously. And what that does, though, is it trains a lot of people, including myself at that time, to just stay in the middle of the wave and think that I'm generating a lot of speed and going really fast. But really, I'm actually, it's not doing that much. And what riding the mid length really does, and the way I would describe kind of what you had described there was, you're kind of almost doing these pumps, but these pumps are these big swooping bottom turn to high
Yeah.
line to bottom turn to high line swoops. And
Yeah.
I think the reason why that can be so beneficial of training yourself to do is because that's actually the way you want to get ready to do a turn, right? And if you're just
Yeah.
pumping in the middle of the wave and then you try and do a turn, you're not going to have enough speed. You're not going to be in the right part of the wave to do a turn. But
Or
by you,
out of rhythm.
exactly. But if you're on a mid length and you're going to the bottom and going all the way to the top, and then you're reading the wave, and that's the other thing, a beautiful thing about mid length is it slows everything down so you can read the wave better, and then you'll make
Yes.
sections that you wouldn't normally make because you just have that natural trim speed, and you'll go around sections, and then you'll see that one section right in front of you and be like, oh, this is where I need to place that turn, and then you're high up on the wave, and then you do the turn, and I think that's where the mid length can be so beneficial, and that's why I love the way you
Yes.
described it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. You're tapping into a few things there that I was sort of seeing in my mind while you were describing your experience on shortboards. So yeah, the mid length lends itself to I don't know if it's easier pacing, but it's just a calmer pacing. You start. I think when you're on a shortboard, it's a different mentality. You're not thinking about pacing as much. I mean, maybe you are if you're a pro, but I think the average person is focused on maneuvers and quote unquote ripping and destroying the wave. So they sort of get ahead of themselves. So it's like they're not necessarily in pace with the wave because the way they're getting from point A to point B is sometimes rushed and sometimes erratic. And so while that's already happening sort of in your mind and your body, in addition, depending what your technique is, a lot of times on a shortboard, you're waving your arms a lot to get the board to move. And it looks like you're throwing pizzas and rolling up the windows. And there's all kinds of analogies there. And that can also, I believe, unless, again, pros and whatever, that's a different story. Because whoever's watching this is probably not a pro. It's like you're just like a normal person who just wants to surf better. Um, Mid lengths, you don't, because again, you don't have to lift it up and tic tac. It's already a byproduct. It's already calming your body. And the board functions best when it's in trim. And so, what do we mean by being in trim? If you're a sailor, you know what that is. If you're on a sailboat, being in trim is when everything on the boat, the sail, the mast, the moon, everything's like perfectly aligned so that the sailboat is moving through the water as efficiently as it possibly can. It's hitting its top speeds. Now, I can't do that on a sailboat if I'm turning the rudder a bunch or if I'm not following the wind line. It's the same with surfing, like that fall line, like instead of rushing things, instead of braking and tacking back and forth, the longer I'm on that rail or the longer I'm flat on the board in a really sweet part of the wave, I'm in trim and I'm getting maximum speed. And what maximum speed does, the same as shortboarding, is it sets you up for the next maneuver. To have success on the next maneuver, you want to go into it with the most speed you can. And we didn't really get into the cutback thing, but so we kind of covered the dropping and climbing, which is that's a real basic thing. That's actually what most surfers probably do. Like if you listen to Scott Bass, who has I think it's the Spit podcast, and he'll always make jokes about all I've got is a bottom turn. It's like, well, that's what most people like. If you get a bottom turn, that's kind of all you need for most people. But
I would say even a lot of people don't even have a bottom turn. A lot of people just pump in the middle of the wave, and they never even bottom turn and get into that place where they can do the top turn. And that's why I think riding a mid-length and doing exactly what you're saying is the perfect way to prepare for doing turns.
Do you struggle with your paddle power? Well, I can go months without surfing and roll up to pumping waves and surf 3-hour sessions multiple times a day, day after day after day, by using the Basis Paddle Trainer. It was a total game changer for me, and it can be for you too. These things actually work, unlike elastic resistance bands. You can train your paddling anytime, anywhere, so you can catch more waves and have more fun. Just 10 to 20 minutes a couple times a week, and you're gonna be in insane paddle shape, right? So remember, the key progression is more waves, and the key to more waves is more paddle power. Check it out at surfbasis.com. You're gonna be stoked.